decade ago, a fight over federal spending and the debt ceiling resulted in the so-called fiscal cliff and sequestration. Now, 10 years later, the U.S. stands on another economic precipice, with the federal government again poised to hit its debt limit. But this time, adding to the uncertainty is a growing number of bank failures. Here to discuss that and much more this morning is Senator Maggie Hassan. Thanks for joining us, Senator.
Thanks so much for having me.
So you're there in the mix in Washington. We've got about 3 weeks until the federal government hits its debt limit. What is the risk right now that the U.S. will default, and can a deal get done?
So what's really important is to understand that if America defaults on its debt, these are the expenditures we've already paid and authorized. If we default on our debt, it plunges our economy into recession. It means the loss of millions of jobs. It means the hollowing out of people's 401k accounts. And it means real chaos in the economic sector, just at a time when we have been regaining economic growth, coming out of the COVID pandemic. Well, we just saw a strong jobs report for the month of April. So it's really, really important that America not default on its debt. And that is a separate issue from concerns about what our budget should actually be and how we make sure that we're reducing our deficit and debt, steps that there's bipartisan support to do. But first, we have to make sure that the full faith and credit of the United States is not compromised, and that we don't plunge our economy into this kind of chaos and recession, and that we don't accede to what the House Republicans are saying they want us to do in exchange for their agreement not to default. They are talking about measures that would rip away care from our veterans, throw 1 million seniors off of Meals on Wheels, among other things, and really decimate our economy.
Do you think they're willing to go over the edge on that, though? If you're not going to sign on to some of their cuts, maybe they don't go along with this.
There are bipartisan bills in Congress right now to get at waste, fraud, and abuse. Senator Rand Paul and I have one of them, which just says, let's look at the duplicative programs that we have in the federal government and let's eliminate them. We took a major step towards good fiscal management and debt reduction when we lowered prescription drug costs. We could do a lot more in that area, and there's bipartisan support on some of those measures. That reduces the federal deficit. We have a separate process for negotiating a budget, but what we can't do is allow a group in the House of Representatives to hold the country's economy hostage because they can't get what they want any other way.
Alongside all of this is this kind of drip, drip, drip of bank failures around the country. How worried are you? How concerned should Granite Staters be that that sector is also in trouble?
Well, the Federal Reserve's report on what happened at Silicon Valley Bank really indicates that, one, it was terrible management at the bank, and two, that the regulator itself, the San Francisco Fed, didn't do its job. There was a culture in the last administration, a very hands-off culture when it came to regulating the banks. We are scouring through what is a pretty intensive report to look at whether there are legislative measures we should take. But at the end of the day, what we have seen so far is depositors being protected, and we need to stay focused on ways we can keep that sector strong while recognizing the difference between small community banks and these very large banks.
A year ago, you visited the border wall and called on the Biden administration to hold off on ending Title 42, which was the Trump-era rule that allowed for rapid deportation of migrants based on some pandemic rules. Now Title 42 is about to expire in just a few days, and the belief is that it's going to cause a major surge in migrant crossings again. You thought it was a bad idea and said it was premature to end last year. Do you think it's appropriate to end Title 42 now?
Well, as you know, the public health crisis is, the public health emergency declaration is ending. I am very concerned that we still need more personnel at the border. We need additional technology. We have made some good strides with investing in technology at our ports of entry, but we do need more resources at the border so it can be safe and secure and humane. I've also just recently returned from a trip with colleagues from both parties to Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras to better understand the dynamics that are creating such a surge of migration. But I'm going to keep pushing the administration because I think we need more people at the border. As you know, I've also just been to the northern border here in New Hampshire, and we need additional people and technology, including cell service at our northern border.
And the acting commissioner of Customs and Border Protection recently testified to Congress. The belief is that maybe 10,000 migrants a day might start crossing on May 12th, the day after Title 42 ends. Why would the administration invite the exacerbation of this crisis, even if the pandemic crisis is over?
Well, I think you are seeing the administration take steps with the announcement of the deploying of troops down to the border to meet that surge. But at the end of the day, we have to have a border where there is security, where people making legitimate asylum claims can have those claims heard, but decided very quickly, and where we can manage the border in accordance with our own national security interests as well as our own values.
The U.S. Attorney's Office just announced a drug bust in, I think, the Lakes region of the North Country.
Yeah.
14 pounds of fentanyl recovered there. Obviously, the loosening of restrictions at the border probably isn't going to help with the drug trade coming across. If you have 10,000, 11,000, 12,000 people coming across, how worried are you that they're going to be able to be carrying more fentanyl that's going to make it to New Hampshire?
Well, so first of all, the fentanyl epidemic continues to devastate our state. We have taken some important steps. At the end of last year, we passed a bipartisan measure that's going to make critical medication-assisted treatment much more available in New Hampshire and nationwide to people who have substance use disorder. And I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that. But we also have really aimed our new technology at the border to be able to detect fentanyl. What I want viewers to know is most fentanyl comes through the ports of entry people try to smuggle it in vehicles and the like, and that's why we've invested in critical technology at the border to detect that. Now, there is a lot more to do to disrupt these cartels. That was one of the reasons we pushed the Mexican government on the trip I was just talking about to work more closely with us. But you're seeing more extraditions from Mexico. You're seeing more arrests. We also have to continue to pressure China to stop sending the precursor chemicals. But at the end of the day, what Granite Staters can do, what Americans can do, is get treatment for substance use disorder. And this MAT bill that we passed, Senator Murkowski from Alaska and I worked on it, removed a critical barrier. So now instead of about 150,000 doctors nationwide able to prescribe something called buprenorphine, which takes away your craving for an opioid, now we'll have about 1.8 million doctors nationwide in emergency rooms, in primary care offices, in community health centers who can prescribe this critical life-saving drug. So I want people to know that if you suffer from substance use disorder, you can call 988 to get help. And we have work to do to implement this new law, but it's critically important that we deploy people and technology at the border to stop this stuff. We need to go after the cartels and disrupt them, but Americans also need to get treatment so the demand lessens.
Immigration was a major issue in your re-election campaign, still is. Yeah. Abortion access was a major issue in your re-election campaign, still is. This recent ruling out of Texas that targeted the abortion medication and access to that, I'm curious if you feel like there needs to be more action within the Congress and the Senate in terms of trying to shore up the FDA protection to make sure that access is still there. I know you and Senator Sheen had the equal access to abortion, but do you need something specifically to do on medication?
Look, I think that lawsuit around abortion medication is still very active, and we're going to need to see what happens in that lawsuit. But let's just take a step back here. This is about whether women, in consultation with their family and their doctors, can make their own decisions about their lives and about their health. This is about women who have complications from a pregnancy, getting critical medical care in ways that save lives and sustains their health. This is fundamental to a woman's freedom and to her full participation in the economy and in our democracy. I will continue to advocate for protections for women to be able to make their own reproductive decisions, including here in New Hampshire, where we continue to see Republicans in the state legislature try to further restrict a woman's freedom. And in the Senate, we have the Women's Health Protection Act, but we don't have a filibuster-proof majority to get that passed. If the court ends up overruling the FDA, and I want people to think what that means. That means a group of judges with law degrees are going to substitute their own personal beliefs and opinions for the scientific fact-finding of the FDA that found that this abortion medication, mifepristone, is safe and effective. That sets a precedent for other FDA authority around other kinds of medication that is deeply, deeply troubling. So I'm hopeful that the lawsuit will resolve to protect access to this critical medication. If it doesn't, I think we will need to try to take action at the federal level.
All right.